Hey everyone, it's Lori, and I am here today with my February reading wrap up. I read 8 books in the month of February, and I'm just going to go through them in the order that I read them. They're fairly eclectic as usual, so I'll just get started. The first book I finished in February was Q's Legacy by Helene Hanff. I read back in January 84 Charing Cross Road and The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street, which are the first 2 books kind of in this, it's almost a series. They're all memoirs of Helene Hanff's life. 84 Charing Cross Road involves her letters back and forth to a British bookseller. The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street focuses more on when she finally goes to England after the publication of her first book of letters. And then Q's Legacy was a little bit strange because it was a little bit all over the place. I still really enjoyed it. She talks about Q, Sir Arthur Quiller Couch, who wrote these books, and after she couldn't continue with, I'm sorry about the noise, my pug just needs to be near me, so the shaky noises, that's the dog. She wasn't able to continue with college, so she was trying to teach herself using the library, and she found one of his books, and that's what led her to have kind of the relationship she had with the bookseller in London, because he assumed knowledge of a lot of things that she didn't have knowledge of. So it's kind of a book of self-education, but it's just kind of a little all over the place. So I really enjoyed this book. I would say I enjoyed 84 Charing Cross Road the most of the 3, then The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street, and then Q's Legacy. Not because it doesn't have fabulous subject material, it does, but because it's just kind of a little all over the place. Next up, I was not really feeling like reading, but wanted to read, so I was having one of those days. So I went and picked up this, which I've been meaning to read for a while. This is Strange Planet by Nathan W. Pyle. This is a comic book. So they're the fun alien comics that you always see on the internet. This was very funny. I enjoyed it a lot, although I felt like I had seen most of the comics already, just in people sharing them on Facebook and stuff like that. So I love the concept behind the alien comics, and I always find them pretty entertaining. It was a short little book. I read it in like an hour. Yeah, it was fun, but I'm not like a comic book aficionado. The third thing I finished in February was The Last Wish, which is the first book of short stories in the Witcher series. And I'm not even going to try to say the name of the author because it's Polish and I'm sure I will butcher it. Anyway, so Netflix, Amazon, one of those has a new Witcher series, and I was wondering if it would be something I might be interested in, so I picked up this book of short stories to see. I enjoyed this. It was a fun read, but I'm not sure if it's really my sort of book. It's a little hard with kind of a more short story format to really discover whether it's for you. So I haven't written off the series. I'm just not convinced that it's for me, so I don't know that I'm gonna make it a big priority to run out and find more Witcher books. I think I have them on my paperback swap wish list, so maybe at some point I'll get some more of these. I don't think our local libraries have any of the Witcher books, so it may be a while before I read any more. And my husband hasn't really shown any interest in watching the series yet, so we haven't watched any of it. But it's something that I would consider. I really liked all of the different monsters in here. Lots of different fun monsters to have in the story. But it was just a little kind of all over the place because it was short stories. This next book I started in January and I finished in February. It was a long book to get through, and that is Literary Converts, Spiritual Inspiration in an Age of Unbelief by Joseph Pierce. So I read this one really slowly. I've had this on the shelf for a long time. It was originally published in the UK, so a majority of the converts talked about in here are British. And because it is written by a Catholic, most of them are converts to Catholicism, although there are a few converts to Anglicanism as well in here. Most of them are authors who had a conversion And they all kind of interrelate. There was a certain period of time, particularly, I would say, in the 40s and 50s, particularly, that a lot of English writers were converting to Christianity of some variety. You know, I don't know how much it had. Some of it, I'm sure, had to do with the war and things like that coming out of that. So I think I made a list of all of the converts talked about in this, and I think there were like 83 that he referred to in this book, which is a lot of people to keep straight. And I think I only knew of, like, to the extent of knowing their name and knowing at least one of their works, maybe 11 of those. So there's a whole lot of people I did not know anything about that I learned about in this book. I really loved the first half of the book, maybe 3/4 of the book. I don't know that I would have structured a book about literary converts the way that Joseph Pierce did, but I don't know that there was a better way to structure it than the way he did. So sometimes somebody would come up in an early chapter and then their story would kind of be told later on. But the part that was hard for me is the ending of this book was like everybody dying, which I get it. Like, that kind of is the end of their earthly life, so it makes sense that that would come up. But the last several chapters, it was just kind of like, and then this person died, and then this person died, and then this person died. And it started to wear on me a little bit. So, you know, there were deaths throughout the book in terms of, you know, different converts died at different periods of time, or influential people to these converts that passed away. But the last few chapters in particular were just all about everybody's death. And that was hard. And also, a lot of them had very bad reactions to Vatican II. So there was a lot of discussion about how they never felt like they were the same after Vatican II, or they never came to like the Mass and the vernacular, and they, you know, died after having somebody say a Latin Mass for them. I think that was Evelyn Waugh, maybe, where he had a friend come say Mass for him, and then he died like 3 hours later. So it was really, really interesting. I definitely recommend this if you're interested in converts to Christianity, particularly if, you know, you're familiar with some of them. You know, there's Evelyn Waugh and C.S. Lewis and, Edith Sitwell and just goes on, Oscar Wilde. There's just so many in here. It's hard to just think of them off the top of my head. But I would, G.K. Chesterton. I don't know how I forgot Chesterton. I would recommend this if you're interested. It is a thick book. I think it's like 450 pages, and it's kind of teeny tiny print. So it's a lot of words, a lot of information, really well researched, lots of footnotes. So if this is something that interests you, I would suggest this one. The next one is a book I picked up at a thrift store in early February when I was up in the Front Range with my girls for a swim meet. And it was just a book that I've always kind of considered maybe I'd want to read someday. And my husband picked it up and he read it, and then he told me I had to read it. So I did. And that was The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. So I know this is an older book. I kind of knew the basic premise of the book already. But I went ahead and read it. I've never seen the movie, and from watching a few clips of the movie, I've decided I never want to see the movie based on this book. But the great things about this book were that it had such interesting characters in terms of, like, we have this reclusive author and this girl who is dying of cancer who wants to find out what happened in her favorite book. And then we have kind of her love interest as well. So I thought the characters were fun and well done. Comparing the characters in the book to what I saw of the movie, I would say that the actors playing Hazel and Augustus in the movie were, one, way too healthy looking, because these kids are like decimated by cancer, particularly Hazel, and two, not nearly emo enough. they're too clean cut. I kind of expected more emo-ness out of them, and that might have something to do with when this book was written. I don't know that I have ever read anything involving cancer like this, so that was really eye-opening for me, kind of seeing what this would look like, how it affects the people around you, how it affects you, those sorts of things. I didn't really love the whole sexual content. And the worst part is it's like 3 to 5 pages of this book. So I have offered for my girls if they would like to read this, because they are very sensitive to sexual content. I've offered to put tape flags in saying skip this part, because I don't think it moved the plot along at all that they jumped into bed together. It just made it like very YAE. And I actually just recently saw something that somebody had posted, or maybe a suggested post on Facebook or something. I don't know. But it was what teens actually think about YA authors and what they write. And one of the major themes in a lot of these tweets from teens about YA books was that they don't spend their whole lives just trying to jump in and out of bed with everyone. And I don't know, maybe if you're dying of terminal cancer, that's a big concern to you, but it just seemed like it wasn't necessary for the storyline, and it wasn't I just didn't see the point of it. I did not like that part of it. I did appreciate how the book ends, and just there's so much good in here. And my husband thinks that the author of the book is actually the protagonist of the book. I don't know that I agree. I still think Hazel is the protagonist, but he is one of the most fascinating antagonists that I have read in a long time. So this kind of got me going on a little bit of a rabbit trail, and so I have another book coming up that started from this, and I am thinking about starting to do a little bit of I don't know if it'll be a series, because it might. I think I'm going to do a video about rabbit trail reading. So I started out with The Fault in Our Stars, and I moved on to another book, and then I'm reading another book now. And then there's another book that I'm interested in picking up next. So maybe when I get to the end of my little rabbit trail, I will just kind of do a big reviewer discussion of all of the books that I read because of The Fault in Our Stars. The next book I read was actually an audiobook. And I think I may have started this one in January. It's a book I've been listening to a lot in the car while waiting on the kids at different activities. That book is Rosewater by Tade Thompson. This is the first of, I believe, 3 books. I think it's just a trilogy. My husband's listened to all 3, and we have all 3. I'm just not sure that third one is the final book or not. So basically this is a fantasy series, and it's set in Nigeria, and there are certain people that are sensitives. That's what they call them, and they can kind of do special things. They can read minds. They can enter this place called the Xenosphere, which is a hyped up internet almost. It's all throughout. It's actually very complicated, but so our main character in Rosewater is a sensitive, and all the sensitives are getting sick, and so he is trying to figure out what is going on with that. There's also some aliens that are involved that had come down. This is many years after the aliens had settled. So I don't exactly know where we're going with the next one. It did kind of wrap it up into a little bit of a bow for the main character in this book. I wonder if this was a case of the author not knowing whether he would be able to get more books published, perhaps. Maybe he was afraid it was going to have to be a standalone. So there are 2 more, and I know that at least in another one of them, there's a different main character who is a very mysterious character in the first book. So I'm looking forward to finding out more about her in, I think it's the 3rd book where she comes up. So if you're looking for a fantasy book, I think the audiobooks were really well done. There is a lot of sex in said book, and I'm not a big fan in general. but it doesn't bother me as much in adult books because you kind of know that that's a possibility. So some of it's a bit gratuitous and like more information than I really needed to know. But overall, it's just such an interesting storyline that I really enjoyed listening to that as well. Then the second to last book I'm going to talk about is the one that I started because of The Fault in Our Stars. And so, of course, this is a nonfiction book that John Green actually suggests as reading, and that is The Emperor of All Maladies. The only way this was available at our libraries locally was as an audio book through our digital consortium. And it's a 23-hour audiobook, and I got a checkout for 14 days because I had to put it on hold, and it was automatically checked out to me, so I couldn't make it the longer time. You can up it to 21, but because it was automatically checked out to me, I only had 14 days. And so I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to listen to like 2 hours a day. I finished the whole thing in 4 days. I just could not put this book down. So for like 4 days, my family had to like wave at me to get me to take my earbuds out so that I could listen to any concerns they had, because I was busy listening to The Emperor of All Maladies. So basically, it's a whole history of cancer. It's almost a memoir of cancer. So it talks about, all of the like deep historical roots of cancer, the first instances of cancer being seen in history, like being talked about, and how deadly cancer was, a lot of different types of cancer, the different treatments for cancer, what cancers now have really good treatments and what cancers don't. So it was a tough thing to listen to in a lot of ways. We have had some experience with family and friends with cancer. Brett lost a younger sibling to cancer when he was very little, like 7 or 8 maybe, when his little brother died. And my mom had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that was when Charlotte was very little, so it was a very stressful time when she was going through her chemotherapy and everything. But to be honest, I didn't know a whole lot about cancer other than like the names of a few that are the cancers you really don't want to have, because getting those cancers is like a death sentence. So I have so much more understanding of cancer now because I read this or listened to this book. The audiobook, the narrator was not great, but just the whole book was so compelling that I just really could not stop myself. So I finished a 23-hour audiobook in 4 days. So I do recommend that one as well. And because of something in that one, I picked up another book that I'm reading now. So I will have that in my March wrap up, the next book in my little rabbit trail of cancer books. So for what that's worth, you can come back next month and find out about that book. Finally, the last book I read in the month of February, actually I started at the beginning of February, it just took me a long time, was the 8th Wheel of Time book. I can't keep track of where I am now. The Path of Daggers. This is another one that's in the slog, as people say, where like not a whole lot happens. Kind of the area where a lot of people give up on the Wheel of Time. I actually enjoyed this quite a bit. We spent a lot of the time in this book with Egwene, and she is developing into a very interesting character. We also spent quite a bit of time with Rand, and Rand had some really dramatic moments. There was just a little bit with Perrin as well, and I always enjoy Perrin. He is my favorite Wheel of Time character. And I don't know if Matt even came, like, if he was mentioned in this book, but I don't know that there was a single scene with Matt in this whole book. So, I have just been really enjoying all of the Wheel Time books, and I didn't find this one to be less enjoyable than the others. It's definitely not my favorite, but definitely not my least favorite either. So it's somewhere in the middling area of the Wheel of Time books, but I've enjoyed all of them so far. So I'm going to move on to book 9 as soon as I can go pick it up at the library. So that is all of the books that I read in the month of February. If you've read any of these books, and if you'd like to discuss them with me, please do so down in the comments. If you enjoy hearing about a wide variety of books from an eclectic reader, feel free to click the subscribe button so that you don't miss out. I would love to have you back more often. So I hope you'll have a wonderful day. See you next time. Bye.